Your mood does not manifest. Whether you're happy or you're sad, that is not what is manifesting. It's the identity that you have that is manifesting. And I know this probably goes against a lot of things that you've heard in manifestation circles, but I want you to stick with me here and I'm going to explain it to you. Because what I've found is that the law of attraction community has created this almost impossible standard that you need to be in a positive state 24/7. And I tried that and it's freaking exhausting. It's not the thing. Welcome back to the Live Free Lifestyle Podcast. This is a show all about what it means to truly live free in your life, in love, and in your purpose. I'm your host, Leah Brathwaite, author, soul advisor, and transformational coach, and I am here to help you live a life that feels as good as it looks. So today we are diving into one of the most misunderstood aspects of manifestation and personal development, and honestly, even spirituality. And this is something that has the power to completely transform how you show up in your life. So there's this pervasive myth in the manifestation and the transformation world that you have to be high vibe all the time, good vibes only. That if you're feeling sad or angry or frustrated, you're somehow doing it wrong and you're going to manifest bad things. So you've probably heard things like just raise your vibe, choose happiness, don't be so negative. But what if I told you that this is actually toxic positivity and it's actually blocking your manifestations? That the secret isn't managing your emotions, but about understanding how and what your soul is speaking to you through your feelings. So today we are going to be exploring the truth about emotions, why they're not these obstacles to overcome, but they're actually guidance from your deepest self. We're going to be talking about some timeless wisdom from one of my favorite spiritual teachers. And we're also going to dive into stories from my own transformation so that I can give you these practical tools that I've learned so that you can validate your feelings instead of suppressing them. And what I'm going to be teaching you today comes directly from the Validate Your Feelings chapter in my book. And it's the V step in the Live Free method. Because what I've learned is that your emotions are not problems to solve. There's nothing wrong with you. They are the language of your soul. And it's how it guides you back home to yourself and to everything that is meant for you. So let's dive in. I want to first start with something that if you're into personal development or manifestation, or you've read things like The Secret, or you're into law of attraction sort of things, this might blow your mind a little bit, but your mood does not manifest. Whether you're happy or you're sad, that is not what is manifesting. It's the identity that you have that is manifesting. And I know this probably goes against a lot of things that you've heard in manifestation circles, but I want you to stick with me here and I'm going to explain it to you. Because what I've found is that the law of attraction community has created this almost impossible standard that you need to be in a positive state 24/7, that you need to live in the delusional state of everything is great and everything is beautiful 24/7, that any negative emotions are somehow going to ruin your manifestations or lower your vibe. And I tried that and it's freaking exhausting. It's not the thing. So here is the thing. It doesn't even work, because when you're forcing positivity, you're performing this high vibe energy, you're actually disconnecting from your authentic self. And if you listen to last week's episode about the secret to manifesting it all, your authentic self is your power. That's where all of your truth, your power, everything that is meant for you lives on that frequency. And I learned this the hard way. Because growing up in a really restrictive and repressive religious environment, I was taught that my feelings didn't matter. In fact, I was taught that my feelings were dangerous, that they could somehow lead me astray or lead me away from what was right. So my early emotional development, the things that I learned about feelings and emotions were essentially not to have them and to pay attention to what was going on outside of me rather than what was going on inside of me. especially when it came to my dad, who hadn't really learned to develop his own feelings in a way that was healthy or effectively communicative. So I became a master at emotional suppression at a young age. I would just watch and anticipate his moods and adjust myself to avoid conflict. I would dim down my light if I was being too enthusiastic and annoying, or I wasn't sitting still at church. And then when he was irritated, I would just try to do the right thing, ramp up the charm to try to balance out his moods. So if you feel seen in that, you are so not alone in the idea of trying to stay safe or trying to find peace and harmony in your experience as a child by altering the way that you express yourself. One of the common statements that I think kids that grew up in the 80s or 90s from their parents is like, stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about. I know I'm not the only one that has had that said to them, but the idea of expressing emotions wasn't something that was celebrated. And so I carried this pattern into my adult life. I became a people-pleasing perfectionist. I was constantly monitoring everybody else's emotional temperature and then adjusting myself accordingly. And I thought that this was being loving, that this was being helpful, that this was being good. But really, I was abandoning myself over and over and over again, trying to make everybody else feel good when I didn't even know what I was feeling inside. And you know what happened? I ended up anxious and depressed and completely disconnected from what I actually wanted because I had no idea how I actually felt. And so the breaking point came for me when I was standing in my dream kitchen, in this dream home that I had just spent the last 12 months designing and decorating and making everything look beautiful and perfect. And it looked like a dream from the outside, but I realized that I was living a lie that I could not be in for another second. And all of that emotional suppression, all of that performing had led me to a place where I felt like a prisoner in my own life. So here's what I discovered. When you invalidate your feelings, you push them down, or you try this positive, think your way out of them, you're not just suppressing your emotions, but you're actually suppressing your soul's guidance system. Your feelings aren't random. They are information. They're your internal GPS telling you when you're aligned with your truth and when you're not. So when you shut that down, you lose your way and you end up somewhere that you have no idea how you got there, thinking, I'm supposed to want all of this. Why don't I feel happy with it? So one of my favorite books speaks to this concept really beautifully. It's called Feeling is the Secret by Neville Goddard, who is a spiritual teacher, a manifestation master from the 1940s, I think is when this book was written. But the wisdom that he shares is absolutely timeless. And one of his core teachings is that the subconscious doesn't originate ideas, but it accepts what you feel to be true. It accepts thoughts and ideas that your conscious mind feels to be true. And then it expresses those ideas. So in other words, it's not just what you think that creates your reality. It's what you feel to be true at the deepest level. It's that subconscious programming that we talked about a couple episodes ago. So this is where most people get it wrong because they think, okay, feeling is the secret, which means that you need to be in a constant state of feeling, of like this emotional intensity, pumping yourself up or like forcing excitement, manufacturing this high vibe energy all day long. And that's not what he means at all. He's actually talking about something much deeper. It's the feeling of your desire being fulfilled, not the excitement of wanting something, but the calm certainty of having it. And so there's a huge difference there. So if you think about something that you already have in your life that you're grateful for, maybe it's your home or your partner or your family or your pet. How does that feel when you think about those things? You don't get like all amped up and excited, right? You feel like peaceful, you feel grateful, you feel content. There's this sort of quiet certainty. There's like a gentle smile on your face, not elation. And that's the feeling that Neville was talking about. It's not this manufactured emotion, it's this authentic inner knowing. And so when we're trying to force this high vibe energy all the time, which is what I was doing, if you looked at my life from the outside, you'd be like, oh my gosh, she's such a positive, smiley person. And that's not to say that all of it was a lie, but it wasn't completely authentic. I was trying to put on a happy face so that people around me would feel comfortable. I was trying to pretend that I was easygoing and chill and going with the flow and like I didn't matter and I didn't care or everything was fine because I wanted everybody around me to feel okay and fine. But I was actually working against myself. I was performing rather than being, and that performance became exhausting. That disconnection from authenticity created so much more chaos internally. So the real secret isn't about controlling your mood. It's about knowing who you are at your core. It's about identity, not temporary emotional states. So when you know who you are, when you have that quiet certainty about your worth, your capabilities, your connection to something greater, that's what creates lasting change. Not the temporary high of a good mood, but the deep knowing of your true self. So that's why meditation and turning towards myself daily became so crucial in my transformation, not because it made me happy all the time, but because it helped me to access that still point in myself, that place where I could hear the whispers of my soul above all of the outside noise. So I want to share something that actually helped me to understand emotions on a deeper level. And it's when I started practicing yoga. It's actually kind of funny / embarrassing to share this because when I started, I would get so angry in warrior poses. Like I would get like viciously angry, like violent thoughts would come up seemingly out of nowhere. I'd be standing there with my legs shaking, my arms outstretched, and mentally I was just lashing out at the teacher. I was lashing out at the students around me. And I was like, look at these idiots all standing there. Like, does nobody care? Like, is nobody feeling anything? And I would get so mad at these postures. And I couldn't figure out why, because everybody else seemed to be like in this calm, zenful state, just breathing. And I was in utter chaos internally. I literally thought there was something wrong with me because I was the only one that was getting angry at something that was supposed to be calming and peaceful. So what I learned is that we store our issues in our tissues. All those years of suppressing my emotions, of pushing down my anger and my frustration and my disappointment to seem perfect and easygoing and palatable for others, all of that was trapped in my body because energy in motion, emotions, they don't just disappear if you don't allow them to move through you. That energy gets stored in your body. That energetic process of moving through you gets stopped and it gets trapped. So these yoga poses were literally moving all of that stuck energy, bringing it up to the surface so I could finally feel it all and release it. My body was showing me what I had been carrying. My soul was speaking through feeling, trying to get my attention, but I wasn't listening for so many years. And then it suddenly started to make sense as to why I developed this mysterious neurological condition that doctors couldn't explain, that they had no idea where it came from. They couldn't find the cause. They just saw the manifestation of it. On nerve conduction studies, on MRIs, there was a slowing of the transmission of energy through my body. And it was because there was all of these places where I had stopped myself from feeling. And that energy, like I said, it has to go somewhere. And so that's what manifests in our bodies as dis-ease, as mysterious illnesses, as anxieties, as depression, as pains and aches. Our emotions and feelings are how our soul lets us know how aligned we are to ourselves and to what's going on around us. So when we block ourselves from feeling, or we just try to pretend that we only ever experience this one happy feeling, we're completely shutting down the system that is meant to guide us. So here's the thing. I had to learn the difference between a true emotion on a soul level and then a reaction based on old programming. So when you've been suppressing your feelings for years, when they finally start to surface, it can feel a little bit overwhelming. Like sometimes it's disproportionate to what is actually happening. And there's this great saying that says, if it's hysterical, it's historical, which means that when our reaction seems to be bigger than the trigger, it's often because we're not just responding to what's happening in the present moment, but we're responding to all of the times in the past when we felt that same way but couldn't express it. So, for example, I hear this often with my clients in relationships. They'll like lash out at their husband for leaving socks on the ground and then feel kind of crazy about it after. But it's not about the socks. It's about all of the other little micro moments where an emotion wasn't expressed, where they didn't communicate what was actually happening inside of them. And then it's that straw that breaks the camel's back that leads to a big outburst. So this is why emotional validation is so crucial, because we want to allow ourselves to feel our feelings, not wallowing in them as like victims, but to honor them so that we can understand what our soul is trying to tell us, how to get back into alignment. What I realized for myself was that my need to be liked and accepted, my need to please, had completely overridden the senses in my body, my desires, and my feelings. I had no idea what I wanted even. I was so focused on managing everybody else's emotions that I had completely lost touch with my own. But when I really started tuning in and listening to what I was feeling and honoring it as valid information, that's when everything started to shift. I learned that different emotions have different physical sensations in my body. So, for example, fear feels like this contraction, like a squeezing in my chest, whereas excitement feels kind of like this bubbling from deep within. And what I discovered is that intuitive knowing feels more like a gentle sensation, like a yes, this is right. And so when I started paying attention to those subtler sensations, I could tell when I was moving towards my truth and when I was moving away from it. The feeling that led me to end my marriage wasn't anger or resentment or anything really negative. It was just this deep knowing that we weren't bringing out the best in each other. It was like this soul level recognition that we were both playing roles instead of being ourselves. And it's the same feeling that led me to leave my church. It wasn't like this massive rebellion or like, I'm out of here sort of feeling. It was just my inability to continue to invalidate my own inner knowing just for the sake of fitting in. So these weren't emotional reactions. They were subtle soul communications. They were whispers over and over again that I kept hearing and finally listened to. But I could only hear them when I stopped trying to manage and control my feelings and then started listening to them instead. And it's a skill that you can continue to hone, because that feeling of what is right and what is true is also what led me to stepping into my purpose, to finding the love of my life, to creating a life beyond my wildest dreams. All of those little moments and choices were all because of deep resonance with my soul and who I truly am. So there's this story that I want to share with you that comes to mind of, I think it was a monk who is teaching his students about the nature of our internal states. And he told them about a man who was carrying a hot cup of coffee. And as he's walking, somebody bumps into him and he spills his coffee everywhere. So the monk asks his students, why do you think he spilt his coffee? I mean, it seems pretty obvious. So the students reply, because somebody bumped into him. No, said the monk. He spilled his coffee because there was coffee in his cup. If there had been water in the cup, he would have spilled water. If there had been tea, he would have spilled tea. So this teaching here is showing us that when life bumps us, when we have circumstances or choice points in our life, we express what is inside of us. So if you're filled with anger, or you're filled with fear, or you're filled with shame or guilt, what comes out when you're triggered or when you're moving through the world and you interact with others is going to be fear and anger and shame and guilt. But if you're filled with love, with peace, with kindness, if you have gotten to a place where you've been able to reprogram your mind to align with your true self, then that is what emerges when you're at these choice points in your life or when you're under pressure. So this completely changed how I thought about emotional reactions, because it's not about what's happening to you, it's about what's already inside of you. And so most people will try to spend their time controlling their external circumstances. If my partner just does exactly what I want him to do, then I will be happy. Or if other people just stop being so difficult, then I'll be okay in the world. Or if my boss just appreciates me more, then I will feel successful. But you can imagine trying to control 8 billion people who are on this planet that you are interacting with. That's overwhelming. That's anxiety inducing. It also creates this feeling of depression or this feeling of victim mentality of like, there's no way I can control everything outside of me. So the real work isn't about trying to control what's around you. It's about cultivating power internally. It's about asking yourself, what am I filling my cup with? And for years, I was filling my cup with fear. The fear of disappointing people, the fear of not being good enough, the fear of being too much, the fear of being rejected. So when life came at me, that's what spilled out. It was anxiety. It was people pleasing. It was perfectionism. It was like trying to control. So it wasn't until I started doing the inner work, the meditation, the journaling, the conscious choice to validate my feelings instead of suppressing them that I actually began to fill my cup differently. I started to fill it with self-love, with trust in my intuition, trust in life, knowing that I am enough exactly as I am. And you know what happened? When I started making decisions, when I started to feel pressure, when life lifed, that's what started to come out. And I started to react from a place of power, a response more so than a reacting of something old. And so this is why the high vibe only approach doesn't work, because if you're just putting on this positive veneer over your fear and your wounds, when life happens, what's inside of you, the fear, is still what spills out. But when you do the real work, when you validate your feelings, when you process them, when you heal what needs to be healed, you're actually changing what's inside of you, what's in your cup at the deepest level. So it doesn't mean that you're never going to feel difficult emotions. I still feel things that are hard, but it means that when you do, you have the capacity to feel them without being overwhelmed by them. You can ask yourself, what is this feeling trying to tell me? What does my soul need right now? So I want to just say here that there's a big difference between emotional intelligence and emotional management. And so emotional management is what I was doing for most of my life. It's the controlling, it's the suppressing, it's the performing, it's pretending to be fine and easygoing, not rocking the boat. It's that voice that's saying, I shouldn't feel this way, or I need to think more positively, or I just need to get over it. Emotional management treats your emotions like problems that need to be solved, or something to avoid, or like an enemy to defeat. But emotional intelligence is completely different. It's understanding that your emotions carry powerful information. It's validating what you're feeling as legitimate and important, and it's responding from that wisdom rather than reacting from old wounds. So I want to share with you the process that I learned, and it's what I teach inside of the Live Free method. And it's 3 simple steps. The first is to name the emotion. And this sounds really simple, but if you've suppressed your emotions for many, many years, you might struggle to identify what you're actually experiencing. Are you sad or are you disappointed? Are you angry or are you hurt? Are you excited or anxious? So this is where it's important to get specific. And there are resources that I share in the book, in the program. You can even find them online about ways to have a way to understand your feelings. I had to use a feeling wheel at the beginning. And this is like a chart basically that has like dozens and dozens of emotions, because I'd become so disconnected from my internal experience. I couldn't really differentiate the difference between being sad or being disappointed or being angry or being hurt. It was just sad, or it was just angry, or it was just happy. So you start to see, the more you become emotionally intelligent, that there are varying shades of gray in our experience of emotions. And each one gives a significant amount of information as to what comes next. So the first step is to name the emotion. The second step is to connect to the feeling in your body, because your body is how energy is experienced and expressed. So where do you feel it physically? This energy in motion, this emotion within you. What does it feel like? Is it tight or is it expansive? Is it heavy? Is it light? Is it hot? Is it cold? Emotions aren't just a mental experience. They are embodied experiences. And this was a revelation for me. I learned that anxiety and excitement can sometimes seem like the same thing, but they feel very slightly different in my body. Even though they can seem similar mentally, anxiety feels like this constriction in my chest, whereas excitement feels like expansion, like this energy that bubbles up. It's coming out instead of squeezing in. So when I learned to feel into my body, I could distinguish between intuitive guidance and fear-based reactions, because your soul whispers are gentle and expansive. They feel like lightness, like an opening, whereas fear is going to feel more tight and constrictive. And so the third step then is, once you've named the emotion, once you've connected to the feeling it's choosing how you respond to it. And this is where wisdom comes in, because just because you feel something doesn't mean you need to act on it impulsively, but just because you choose not to act on it doesn't mean you should suppress it. So you can feel angry and choose not to lash out. You can feel scared and choose to move forward anyways. You can feel sad and you can still choose to show up for your commitments. So the key question that I learned to ask myself is this feeling bringing me closer to myself or causing me to abandon myself? So if this is a feeling that's pulling me towards my truth, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it feels scary, I know that's my soul's guidance. And if it's pulling me away from my truth towards like people pleasing or self-abandonment, then that's an old pattern that's getting triggered. So for example, if I'm feeling nervous about giving a talk or something, or getting on stage and speaking, that's my soul letting me know, like, this matters. I'm stretching beyond my comfort zone here. It doesn't mean that it's wrong though. So this guidance is to help me prepare, to breathe deeply, to not allow myself to stop myself from the speaking engagement altogether. But if I'm feeling like I need to dim my light so that others feel more comfortable, or, oh, maybe I shouldn't wear this because somebody might say something about it, that's not my soul guidance. That's my old programming trying to keep me small. So the difference isn't always obvious, which is why this is a practice. But the more you tune in, the more you can distinguish between the voice of your soul and the voice of your conditioning. So I want to just talk really briefly about what happens when your emotions feel really big. Because if you've been suppressing your emotions for years, when they start to surface, it can sometimes feel like a tsunami. And this is what happened to me during my transformation. I went from feeling basically nothing, disconnected, to feeling everything so intensely. And what I want you to know is that when emotions feel too big, it's often because they're not just about the present moment. So that saying that I said before, if it's hysterical, it's historical, that's more about all of the times that you felt that way, but you couldn't express it. It's about all of the times that you had to shrink yourself down or hold yourself back. And this moment that you're experiencing the emotion is this opening that's allowing all of that to come forward. So if it feels like there's a lot more happening in your life, if it feels like there's a huge amount of energy when you're first starting this practice, know that it's because there is a lot probably that's pent up. And it's all the times that you felt that way, but couldn't really express it. So, for example, if you cry for 3 hours because somebody was dismissive to you, whereas in the past you never cried or you never allowed yourself to experience that emotion, then it's probably not just because of that one interaction. You're crying for all of the times that you were feeling dismissed, going all the way back to childhood. And this is actually healing. This is your system clearing out old trapped emotional energy. And it can feel like a lot when it's happening. It can feel like, oh my God, am I ever going to be okay again? But here's what I want you to remember. You don't have to stay stuck in those emotions. You can allow it to move through you, feel it for as much as you can, and then take a break. Like, go take a bath, go for a walk, call a friend, come back to it later if you need to. But I want you to remember that your emotions are temporary. Even if they feel like they're going to last forever, when you're in them, they don't. They actually are meant to move through us when we allow them to. But it's the resistance that makes them stick around. So in actuality, it only takes 90 seconds for an emotional process to move through you. And it's a process of chemicals that are moving through your system, neurotransmitters, this electrical current. When you allow it to move all the way through without stopping it, without avoiding it, it really is a 90-second process. And then the third is to remember that you don't have to figure everything out while you're feeling things intensely. When you're in the middle of grief or anger or fear, that's not the time to make major life decisions because you're not able to see things clearly. So go through those steps that I shared with you before. Name the emotion, connect with it in your body, and then choose. So feel it and then take action. Let the wisdom emerge after the emotional wave has passed. And if you're noticing that your feelings are becoming unmanageable or they feel intensely overwhelming, then reach out for professional support. There's no shame in getting help to process those big feelings. Sometimes you just need a skilled guide to help us navigate the territory of our own heart. So a therapist, a coach, a mentor, somebody who is trained and is professional. And the goal is not to never feel things intensely. The goal is to have the capacity to feel whatever arises without being destroyed by it. So, how do you actually bring this into the practical everyday world? I gave you the 3-step process to validate your feelings, but I also want you to remember that this is a daily practice. So this is something to do regularly to check in with yourself. You go to sleep and you wake up with a brand new slate available for you every day. So check in with yourself in the morning. What am I feeling? How am I feeling? Not what do I think I should feel or what would be convenient for me to be experiencing, but how am I actually feeling? And sometimes it'll be multiple things, and sometimes you might not feel anything at all. This is why this second practice of a body scan is really helpful. And you can do this first thing in the morning. You can do this multiple times during the day, but just closing your eyes and bringing your attention to different parts of your body, starting with your head and moving down all the way to your toes. And notice any tension, any sensations, anything that's feeling tight, anything that's feeling open. Because often our bodies know what we're feeling before our minds do. So you might notice as you're doing your body scan, there's like a knot in your stomach. And that may be telling you something about an important decision or something that you're thinking about on a subconscious level. And then the third step is to let it out. So to journal without censoring. And this was so huge for me when I was doing my healing process at the beginning of my transformation. What I would do is set a timer for 10 minutes and just write whatever came up. No editing, no judging. I call it free writing. And it's just allowing your thoughts and your feelings to flow out onto paper. And sometimes I would discover things that I didn't even realize I was feeling. Like I'd start writing about being frustrated about something, and then realize I was actually hurt by something that had happened before. So allowing yourself to be in process with your emotions instead of thinking they need to be a certain way or cutting them off, just allowing them to be present. And then learning to distinguish between your soul guidance and your ego reactions. And this takes some practice, but I want to give you just a few tips that you can use. So your soul guidance is going to feel like this gentle but persistent acknowledgement of something. It's going to feel like expansive in your body. It'll be aligned with your values, and it will be loving, even if it feels challenging. Your intuition won't always say things that are comfortable or that feel good, but it will always come with a loving and a neutral energy. Whereas your ego reactions are always going to feel urgent or demanding or like a contraction in your body. They're going to be really based in fear or lack or scarcity, and it's going to be this reactive energy rather than responsive. So, for example, your soul might whisper, this relationship isn't helping me grow anymore, or I've outgrown it. Whereas your ego is going to say, they don't appreciate you. They don't do this. They don't do that. And it's going to be this dramatic kind of reactive energy. So differentiating between those two is so key to be able to follow your soul towards freedom, towards success, towards what is authentically meant for you. And then finally, allowing yourself to feel your feelings and move through emotional regulation practices like breath work or other nervous system practices. Because when your feelings get intense, if you remember to breathe, it anchors you into the present moment. So that historical pattern gets brought into the present moment, and you can resolve through it. You can stay present with what you're feeling without being too overwhelmed by it. So you can feel your feelings without needing that knee-jerk reaction. So validation is about honoring the message, not necessarily following every instruction. So here's what I want you to remember as we tie this all together, that your emotions aren't obstacles on your path to freedom, to fulfillment, to success or abundance. They are your path. They're how your soul communicates with you, how it guides you, how it helps you to navigate towards your truth. Because here's what I know for sure, that when you learn to validate your feelings instead of suppressing them, when you understand that your soul speaks through emotion, you'll never be lost again. You'll always know the next right step because you'll be able to feel it in your body. So if this episode resonated with you and you're ready for deeper support in learning to trust yourself, to validate your truth, to express it clearly, then I invite you to check out my Live Free Lifestyle experience. The doors are open. This is a powerful container where you are able to transform, to reconnect, and to align yourself to your authentic path. And you can find all of the details at leahbrathwaite.com or in the show notes below. So until next time, keep listening to your soul, keep honoring your feelings, and keep living free. I will see you in the next episode. Bye.